Good morning, I'm Tamara Shoemaker. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who played the mysterious game without a name in elementary school where the girls chased the boys, and then the boys chased the girls, and sometimes one or the other of us got caught and taken to jail, which at least for us was a fort that we built in the woods on school property. And the jailed inhabitant was then kept in place until he or she either escaped or somebody from the other team came to free them. And then certain destructive ramifications happened to the forts that we had built in the process. The boys would tear down the girls' fort every day at recess. And then in retaliation, the girls would tear down the boys' fort. And it just went back and forth. And loyalties ran really strong in our class. If the girls saw an impending disaster happening to any other girl, then we all rallied around that girl to keep her safe. And then the boys similarly would declare war on any girl who threatened any boy. So we had quite a little military conquest happening on our school playground. Side note, in a completely unbiased statement, right? The girls' fort was way better than the boys' fort because we had a sitting room, which was open space between our trees, and we had chairs, which were cut logs that stood on end, and there was traps, basically, dips in ground that were covered over with leaves, and those were for the pesky boys who wandered too close with a mind bent on fort destruction. So that was fun. Anyway. This morning, Joshua chapter 19 covered the last apportionments of land among the tribes that were still left, right? So Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan were apportioned in this chapter, plus a city for Joshua. Caleb had gotten the first pick of the land, and he'd taken over Hebron in the land of Judah, and then Joshua waits until the end, and he takes a town called Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim. And between these two spies who honored God and didn't fear the enemy because God was with them, the entire nation of Israel settled their land. So, excuse me. In Joshua chapter 19, verse 9, it says, "The inheritance of the Simeonites was taken over from the share of Judah because Judah's portion was more than they needed. So the Simeonites received their inheritance within the territory of Judah." Since the geographical markers of territory are mostly unfamiliar towns and land markings, I've been really thankful for the maps at the back of my Bible to help me keep track of who settles where. So when I was looking at that map the other day, I thought it was really, really interesting to glance at the land of Judah, where in almost the exact center of the shaded territory is a circle where the land of Simeon is designated. So Simeon is like the donut hole in Judah's territory. I wondered how it came about that Judah, completely surrounded the tribe of Simeon. And here in Joshua 19, verse 9, I get a glimpse because Judah's portion was more than they needed. That doesn't necessarily answer my donut hole question because, for instance, couldn't Judah have broken off, half their land and given the other half to the tribe of Simeon? I'm sure that the apportionment had to do with town layout and what made sense as far as who lived in which towns. But whatever the case, I did think, how awesome is this for the tribe of Simeon? None of the other tribes had the donut hole factor in their lands because each of them had at least two, often more, tribes on their borders, and some of them had outside borders and enemy territory to protect. So Simeon had Judah, right? That was it. And barring a feud with brother Judah, they got a really good deal. They had protection from their foreign enemies. The main diplomacy that they had to maintain was their relationship with Judah, and that was it. They had, for lack of a better term, a firewall set up for safety's sake. As I was thinking about this, I turned to Psalm chapter 16, verses 5 and 6, and it says, "Lord, you have assigned me my portion and my cup. You have made my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance." Simeon's boundary lines had fallen in very pleasant places, right? Safe and secure and settled in the center of the protection of a big brother. I know that of Jacob's sons, Judah was actually younger than Simeon, but Judah's land allotment was larger than Simeon's. So if the Simeonites had to travel anywhere, it was through Judah's territory. Judah was watching the comings and the goings of the Simeonites. Today, It's simple, really, right? Our apportionment, our allotment falls within the firewall of the Holy Spirit. I was just today in David Jeremiah's Turning Point. He discusses the various kinds of armor that we find in the scriptures. So, for instance, Goliath wore bronze armor and carried a spear with an iron head. And we find that, I believe, in 1 Samuel. Or maybe, yeah, 1 Samuel. Contrast this with the armor that Paul brings up in Ephesians chapter 6, a belt of truth, a breastplate of righteousness, fitted shoes that come with the gospel of peace, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul reminds the church the weapons that we fight with are not weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. The Lord surrounds us. In Psalm 16:8, it says, I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The Lord will keep you from all harm. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. That's Psalm 121:5 and verses 7 and 8. And then Isaiah 52:12 says, but you will not leave in haste or go in flight, for the Lord will go before you. The God of Israel will be your rear guard. So David wrote a lot of the Psalms, and his fraught life pre-kingship is really well documented. It wasn't like he was safe and secure, right? Saul was continually and habitually hunting him in order to kill him. And during that time, David wrote about the Lord. He wrote praise and passion to the God who fought for him and who protected him. But David was settled exactly in the center of God's will, hiding in, wait for it, the donut hole of his plan. He was secure because, and only because, of the Lord's protection. His boundary, that was his portion and his cup, his boundary that included such pleasant places, his boundary that was his delightful inheritance, referred only to the fact that the Lord surrounded him. And I thought that was pretty amazing. I wrote a little bit about holy boundaries yesterday. And the thing is, somehow we often trick ourselves into thinking that the grass is a little bit greener, on the other side of those boundaries, and that the holy boundaries that the Lord sets up for us are a hindrance. I was thinking this morning, let's look inside the boundary lines, because what a wonderful place that is. Whatever our life circumstances are, if the Lord sets up boundaries for us and around us, we have a delightful inheritance simply because he surrounds us. Nothing happens to us that God doesn't check first. He watches over our comings and goings, both now and forevermore. Thought that was a pretty cool promise. So be encouraged by that today. I'll see you tomorrow.